In the sun-scorched lands that stretch to the horizon, where the dawn spreads gold over the arid fields and the wind blows through the silvery bushes, there is a story waiting to be told. Not a cowboy legend or a thrilling chase between Western gunslingers, but a deeper story of choice, sacrifice, and love that comes not at first sight, but of trust and courage. Have you ever thought that a letter could change fate? That in a moment of seemingly no hope, a person could bet their life on an invitation from a stranger? Today, we will embark on the journey of Harriet Edgewater, young woman from Philadelphia, carrying her dreams, fears, and sacrifices to the harsh land of the American West, where she will meet a man she has never known, but who is destined to change the fate of her family. This is not just a love story. This is a symphony of hard choices, of two sisters caught in the currents of fate, and of secrets that the wind blowing through the prairies still whispers. If you've ever wondered, can love blossom from sacrifice? Can a life seemingly broken find light in the most barren place? Stay with this story until the end, because the answer lies not only in what Harriet does, but also in how you feel the vibrations of each step she leaves on the red soil of the West. And if this story touches something in you, a memory, a longing, or an empathy, leave a comment sharing your feelings. Click like to support this journey and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying stories full of humanity, full of life. That winter, in a small brick house nestled in the middle of an old Philadelphia street, a young woman sat at a worn wooden table. Her slender hands were stained with ink, her fingertips lightly brushing the polished wood. Harriet Edgewater, 21, was writing a letter that she could not have foreseen would change her life. Outside the window, the pale light of late afternoon shone through the dusty glass, creating sparkling streaks on the dust particles floating in the air. Behind the thin wall, the clanging of pots and pans from the kitchen echoed slowly, as heavy as the atmosphere inside the house. Harriet's mother was still making the last of the thin soup from the few remaining potatoes. No one talked about the next meal, because everyone understood. The Edgewater family was slowly fading away. After a long illness, her father, Edward Edgewater, once a respected civil servant, was reduced to a pale shadow, and a hoarse cough could be heard from the next room. Their savings were gone, their meager pension barely covered the coal bill, and a foreclosure notice had been posted on the front door only a few days earlier. No one in the family spoke of it, but everyone could feel the breath of despair creeping through the cracks of the old brick wall. In this situation, Harriet, the eldest daughter, chose the way no one else dared. She wrote back to a marriage advertisement from Wyoming. A small piece of paper was found among the classifieds. Wife wanted, a woman of character, endurance, and responsibility. Can provide lodging and stable assets. Send letters to Caldwell Beaumont, Circle B Ranch, Wyoming Territory. Harriet's close friend, Emma Billings, laughed out loud when she heard the story. Are you marrying a stranger just because he has a farm? Are you marrying a husband or a pirate ship? But Emma didn't know her, perhaps didn't dare admit that sometimes love wasn't the most important thing. Sometimes just keeping the lights on under your roof for one more winter was enough to make a brave girl step into the uncharted land of the future. The letter Harriet sent was simple and sincere. She didn't embellish herself, didn't hide the fact that she needed a chance, a new path for her family. Then she waited, a week, 2 weeks, until one February morning, the letter from Wyoming arrived like a ray of light in the gloomy room. Miss Edgewater, the slanted purple letters read before her eyes. I am Caldwell Beaumont, owner of Circle B Ranch. I appreciate your letter. I am looking for a partner who will not only help me through life in the West, but also share my faith in the future. If you are willing, I look forward to meeting you soon. Harriet read the letter over and over again. The words were sincere, completely different from the image of a rude fat guy that people rumored. People called him Big Caldwell or the pot-bellied owner of Circle B Ranch. But this line, this heart, showed a person who was surprisingly humble and kind. And sometimes, kindness was all a girl was looking for. Her father, though he was too weak to get out of bed, managed to say a heavy sentence. Harriet, I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for us, but if this is the only way to keep this house, then go. Not for me, but for yourself, so that you can have a future. Luba. And Harriet went. She sold a few dresses, a silver brooch that belonged to her mother, and her favorite French book. All of it was exchanged for a train ticket to the West, a place that existed only in her childhood maps and cowboy stories she had heard. On the day she left, her mother did not cry. She just held her daughter's hand and said, "Remember to stay warm. It's dry and windy there." Harriet's younger sister Lucy was the one who cried the most. Her big red eyes hugged her sister tightly, her voice trembling. "Are you sure? To be the wife of a stranger? Do you love him?" Harriet just smiled. There was no love, only duty. But somewhere in Harriet's heart, a spark still burned. Maybe, just maybe, beyond the mountains, there was a man who didn't need her to love him right away, if she had only the courage to start. As the train pulled away, Harriet looked back at her town, the low-slung roofs, the distant whistle of a farewell. She didn't know what awaited her there, but she knew there was no turning back. There was only one letterand, a destiny waiting on the Wyoming horizon. The train ride lasted nearly 2 weeks, through desolate fields, dusty towns, and countless strange eyes. Harriet sat in the third-class carriage, clutching the small bag containing her remaining possessions, her mind reeling with unknown prospects. When the train finally stopped in Cheyenne, the vast expanse of land before her took her breath away. Gone were the cobblestone streets of Philadelphia, only red dust and men with sunburned faces, skeptical eyes, and wide-brimmed hats that hid their expressions. Harriet stepped off, her skirt caught on the edge of the steps, her heart pounding. She had no idea what Caldwell looked like. She had heard that he was an old, stout man, and very wealthy from cattle ranching. He was said to be aloof, rude, and only interested in money. Harriet had prepared herself for a man who was unapproachable, perhaps a little gruff, perhaps uninterested in soft things like love and understanding. But when a short, stocky, bearded man in a leather jacket approached, introduced himself as Bartholomew O'Connell, the manager of Circle B Ranchand, told her that Caldwell was busy with land authorities, she felt a vague unease creep into her. On the carriage ride back to the ranch, O'Connell spoke of Caldwell with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "The master is a man of his word. He's tough, but he's kind. He tells you what he thinks, and he doesn't hide anything from you." Harriet just smiled, her heart growing more confused. Was she walking toward a man who was awkwardly honest, or a crude man who knew how to pretend? When the carriage pulled up in front of the large white house perched on a gentle hill, Harriet was almost stunned. The open space, the long grey-green fields, the straight wooden fences around the pasture, and the house, not only large but immaculate, an oasis of civilization in the wilderness. A man stood in the doorway. He was big, as the rumors said, a beer-barrel belly, broad shoulders that blocked the sun, but his eyes were strange, clear, soft, and when he saw her, he smiled, a slow, sincere smile. "Hello, Miss Edgewater," he said, his voice deep as oak. "I am Caldwell Beaumont. I am sorry I could not meet you in person." He held out his hand. It was thick and warm, not the hand of a city gentleman, but the hand of someone who had used it to real work, steady and sure. "With pleasure, Mr. Beaumont," Harriet said softly, trying to keep her cool. "Pleased to say it, Mr. Beaumont." Harriet did not know how to respond. There was no rudeness, no aggressive words, just politeness, hesitation, and eyes that seemed to penetrate the soul, yet gentle. That afternoon, Caldwell took her on a tour of the farm. He introduced each barn, each horse, each worker. Harriet was not a good conversationalist, but she tried to ask questions about the work and the land. He did not laugh at her shyness, but answered each question patiently, with a respect that made her confused. At night, Harriet lay in the spare room, larger than her entire family's bedroom combined, staring at the wooden ceiling. She did not hate Caldwell. She even found him pleasant, but her heart remained silent, not moved, not quivering like it had in the novels she had hidden away. What did that mean? The next morning, a small note was quietly slipped under the door. "Meet me on the porch when the sun comes up." Harriet put on her simplest dress and stepped out into the lingering mist. Caldwell was already sitting there, in a rocking chair, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "Sit down," he said, not looking at her. After a long moment, he smiled faintly. "You know, people might think I'm looking for a wife because I'm lazy, because I want someone to cook, clean, have children. But really, I'm just lonely. I have a farm, I have money, but no one to talk to every morning like this." Harriet was silent. She had not expected a man like him to be so straightforward. He turned to look at her. "You see me as a big man, a little slow. People call me a fat man. I know that. But I'm not looking for a wife to pretend to love me. I want someone who can see something underneath this shell." He pointed to his stomach, then smiled sadly. "Do you see anything, Harriet?" She didn't know how to answer. Her heart said nothing. But the golden sunlight of the early morning filtered through the leaves, shining on Caldwell's eyes. Those eyes were not fake, not ambitious, just full of hope, and Harriet understood. Perhaps, to love a man like that, there was no need for impulsive emotions, just enough courage to start. But did she have enough courage? That question hung in the wind. No one answered. Harriet could not sleep that night. She tossed and turned in the large bed, where the cold sheets seemed to reflect her own state of mind. Outside on the porch, the wind whistling through the cracks in the door was like a whisper, reminding her of her morning conversation with Caldwell. He was kind, sincere, and strangely gentle compared to all the rumors. But was that enough to love someone? Was it enough to nod to the proposal that would come in just a few days? Harriet was familiar with the life of a woman in those days: sacrifice, burden, endurance. But what she feared most was not the hardship, but living beside a man, day after day, with a heart that did not beat. She did not want to turn her life into a debt of gratitude. And the next morning, when Caldwell invited her to sit in the study with a pot of hot tea, she knew the moment had come. He did not linger. "Harriet, I want us to get married at the end of the month. It can be simple, but I want to start a new life. I have everything arranged, if you agree." Harriet bit her lip. In that moment, images flashed through her mind. Her father coughing softly by the window, her mother wringing her hands in the kitchen, Lucy watching her sister from the train station. She knew what she should say, but her voice broke into a whisper. I can't. I'm sorry." Caldwell was silent. Not angry, not indignant. He just nodded slightly, his eyes downcast like a kite losing its wind. "I understand." Harriet left the room with an aching heart. She had just rejected a good man, a man who had reached out to save her family without asking for anything in return. But how could she live her whole life with him, tormenting herself every time they met? A few days later, she sat under the oil lamp, writing letters home. The ink was blurred with tears. "Dear Lucy, I did what I thought was right. But now I'm not so sure. I can't marry a man I don't love, even though it breaks my heart to see him hurt. What do you think I should do? I'm more lost than ever." She sent the letter in Bartholomew O'Connell's handwriting and walked around the farm like a shadow every day. No one blamed her. Caldwell kept his promise. Let her stay. No pressure, no coldness. But Harriet knew that with each passing day, the wall of silence between them grew thicker. 2 weeks later, a reply from Lucy arrived. The familiar handwriting made Harriet's hands tremble as she opened the envelope. But the content of the letter made her heart clench even tighter. "Dear Harriet, it is not your fault that you cannot love. Love is not a gift that can be given at will. But if you really believe that Caldwell is a good man, if you believe that he can provide a stable life, then let me try. I am not afraid. I used to think I was weak, but now I know that I am stronger than I thought. I do not intend to save anyone. I only want to try to step into the place where you began, to see if I can see something that you have not yet noticed." Harriet sat silently for hours with that letter in her hand. Lucy, the innocent sister, who always laughed when the family was worried, now suggested the craziest thing: marrying a man her sister had rejected. Was it right to allow this to happen? Was she pushing her sister down the very path she had tried to escape? But Harriet understood. Lucy had not come because she had to. She had chosen to come because she wanted to, because she believed in something. And if Caldwell were ready to open up again, who could stop him? The day Lucy arrived in Cheyenne, the sky was strangely blue. Harriet met her at the train station, where she had first stepped off with a cloud of uncertainty. Lucy hugged her, her eyes sparkling but firm. "If you can't, let me try." On the way back to the farm, Harriet didn't say much. She just looked at Lucy, seeing in her eagerness, courage, and something she had once had faith that things would turn out all right. But now, what she cared about most was how Caldwell would react. Would he feel insulted, replaced, or would he see in Lucy what he had hoped Harriet would see? A true companion. At the farmhouse door, Caldwell stepped out as usual, hat in hand, dark leather jacket sun-scarred. Harriet introduced Lucy, and his eyes were a little surprised. When Harriet took him aside and explained everything, he was silent for a long time. Finally, he said something that made Harriet choke. "I am not a shirt to be changed, but if she comes because she wants to understand me, then I will not refuse." Harriet turned away, not letting him see the tears that were falling. She did not know what the future would bring. But now, the biggest question arose in her heart. If Lucy really found happiness with Caldwell, could she, the sister who had rejected it, live with her choice forever? Her own darkness, so that Lucy and Caldwell had the opportunity to get to know each other, to learn about each other, to explore the things that she had avoided. Although initially hesitant, Caldwell welcomed Lucy with a reserved curiosity, slowly but sincerely. And Lucy, with an energetic gentleness, did not hesitate to step towards him. They began to talk every morning on the porch, drinking coffee together, looking out at the fields where the sun dyed the tall grass and the cattle leisurely walked towards the distant river. Lucy asked questions about everything: the first horse he had, why he had chosen this land, what kept him awake at night. Caldwell answered everything, in a voice that was usually calm, but gradually became filled with a rare excitement. He told of the first winters, of living in a makeshift tent in a snowstorm, of being thrown by a wild horse and breaking his ribs, and of how he bought up acres of land, building a little kingdom in the middle of the barren desert. Harriet, every time she walked across the porch, felt like she was a supporting character in the story she had started, and that made her feel both relieved and choked up. Lucy was living out what she had never believed, in that it was possible to love someone you had never dreamed of, if only she had the courage to look beyond the surface. But then, one afternoon when Caldwell asked Harriet to take inventory of the books in the study, everything changed. She found a locked drawer, not locked but just open, as if someone were waiting for it to be opened. The key was lying on the table. Something urged her to try. And inside, among the old papers, Harriet found a sealed envelope, sealed with red wax. The top letter bore a woman's name, Alia Farnsworth. Harriet's hand trembled. The name was familiar. She had heard it mentioned in a faint conversation between the ranch managers that Caldwell had almost married someone, but had broken off the engagement abruptly. Harriet bit her lip, then opened the letter. "Darling, I write this in fear. The people you refuse to sell us land to are threatening our safety. They are not mere businessmen. They are powerful, armed, and vengeful. I have heard their plans, that if you do not give them the iron ore concession near the southern edge, they will not only destroy you legally, they will come after you at any cost. I cannot let that happen. But I cannot stay either. I am sorry." Harriet read, her throat closing. She turned over a few more letters, each one bearing a clear warning of the threat of a man named Zebediah Glay, a land baron, who had tried to buy Caldwell's land and been rebuffed. She folded the letters and put them back, but her mind was unable to return to the same place. Suddenly, all the signs came into sharper focus. O'Connell's anxious glances at the horizon, the gun hidden under Caldwell's chair, the times he stood brooding over a map of the farm. Caldwell wasn't just building a life, he was protecting it from an enemy he had never named. And now, Lucy was entering the vortex without even knowing it. The next day, when Harriet gently asked O'Connell about Zebediah Glay, the old manager looked at her as if she had awakened an old ghost. "Glay is a dangerous man. His polite mask cannot hide his greed. He wanted all the land around here. But Caldwell held firm, and he would not budge. Glay has since regarded him as a thorn in his side." Harriet turned away, her heart pounding. The fields that Caldwell had once boasted of as the fruit of years of hard work were now the land of the man with the power to strangle anyone who dared to refuse him. And then, like an omen, Glay appeared. He did not come alone. One hot afternoon, as Lucy and Caldwell were riding back from the outhouse, a group of riders came riding over the south fence. Harriet saw them from the balcony and raised the alarm. When Caldwell reached the scene, Glay was standing just across the boundary, whip in hand, tapping his horse's thigh. "Long time no see, Beaumont," Glay said, his voice low but not without a hint of menace. "I hear you found a new wife." "That's brave of you." Caldwell didn't reply, but crossed his arms, standing like a wall in the middle of the yard. "You know what I'm here for," Glay continued. "That piece of land to the south, that land you hold on to like your life. I've paid for it the last time generously, but if you insist, I'll have to do it another way." Caldwell growled. "This is my land, and you know it." Glay just laughed. "Legality is one thing, living to defend it is another." Then he turned his horse around, saying nothing more. The air in the house that evening was heavy as stone. Lucy knew something was wrong, but couldn't quite put her finger on it. Harriet knew she couldn't keep quiet much longer. She told them all about the letter, about Alia Farnsworth, about Glay. Lucy was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I chose to come here because I wanted to, but now I choose to stay because I must." Harriet looked at her sister. Lucy's eyes were no longer those of a young girl. They were the eyes of a woman ready to face the world for the man she trusted. And Harriet, for the first time, did not regret giving up this path. But she knew if Glay really did come, it would no longer be a matter of sentiment. It would be a matter of blood, of land, and of survival. The morning of the wedding, the atmosphere at Circle B Ranch was different from any other day. The sky was clear, cloudless. The golden sunlight spread over the prairie like a precious silk. Birds sang in the trees, and the aroma of baking bread wafted from the kitchen. But beneath the peacefulness was a quiet tension that everyone could feel. Since the encounter with Zebediah Glay, Caldwell had not let Lucy go anywhere alone. He had guards guarding the boundary day and night, keeping weapons at the ready, and especially requested that Wyatt Herp, whom Harriet had quietly written to for help, arrive on the wedding day. Lucy sat in front of the mirror, Harriet helping her pin wildflowers into her soft curls. The simple white dress without glitter or fancy chiffon fit well, elegant, and reflected Lucy, pure but brave. In the mirror, Lucy's eyes were steady. She was no longer the dreamy little sister Harriet had left the train station with. She was a woman, ready to step into a new life, with love and danger. "Are you afraid?" Harriet asked. Her voice choked. Lucy squeezed her hand. "I am, but not of him. I'm afraid of losing the chance to do the right thing." Harriet said nothing. She knew she had no reason to stop Lucy. This marriage, though it had begun as a substitute, had become Lucy's own. The wedding was held outdoors, on the porch of the main house. A few dozen farmhands gathered, hats in hand, faces beaming but looking discreetly toward the horizon, as if waiting for something other than the ceremony. The officiant, a minister who had arrived late because his wheel had broken on the way, had not yet arrived, so Caldwell suggested that the vows be read and signed when the minister arrived. Harriet stood outside the circle, her heart heavy with mixed emotions. When Lucy stepped out in her white dress, and Caldwell looked at her as if no one else existed, Harriet understood that love could come from the smallest and most sincere things. Everything seemed perfect. But then, the sound of hooves rang out in the distance. Harriet knew without turning. Glay had arrived. A group of riders broke through the south fence, galloping toward the wedding. Shout-outs rang out from the guard posts. Caldwell's men drew their guns and formed a line of protection. Lucy gripped Caldwell's hand. His face was as stony as a rock. Zebediah Glay, in a dark leather jacket and a wide-brimmed hat as black as night, stopped his horse just outside the entrance. He dismounted, his eyes darting around as if to steal every bit of peace from the place. "I have come to congratulate you," he said, his voice sarcastic, then glanced at Lucy. "A beautiful wife, brave, Beaumont, but bravery can be foolish if you don't know when to stop." Caldwell stepped forward. "You've crossed the line, Glay. This is my home, she's my wife, and today is our wedding day. Go away before you commit another crime." Glay sneered. "Do you think the law will protect you forever? I've bought everything along the border, and I'll take it back even if it means stepping on your blood." He drew his gun. The scene paused for a moment that seemed endless, but then there was a bang. Not from Glay's gun, from Lucy. The young girl, in her white wedding dress, held the pistol Caldwell had taught her to shoot with a trembling hand. The first bullet hit the ground in front of Glay's feet. It missed, but it was enough to send him back half a step. "Don't touch my beloved," Lucy said, her voice low but clear. "You're not a monster of legend. You're just a power-hungry dog." Glay whirled toward her, raising his gun in anger. But it was too late. Wyatt Earp and 2 deputies rode up just in time. They had been waiting nearby as Harriet had planned. Earp didn't need a second warning. He raised his gun and shot Glay cleanly before he could pull the trigger. He fell, blood dripping from his shoulder, alive but outmatched. Glay's men saw this and either ran away or were arrested. Earp quickly ordered the handcuffs, the weapons confiscated, and the warrants read out for trespassing, threatening to kill, and destruction of property. Caldwell ran to embrace Lucy, and they both nearly collapsed in each other's arms. He said nothing, just held her tight. Lucy, pale as a sheet, eyes still wide but unbroken. She had just saved the life of her beloved, and proved that she was more than just a bride, but a courageous defender of what was right. Earp turned to Harriet, nodding slightly. "You were right to call me. You saved the farm." Harriet nodded, her eyes moist. For a strange moment, everything melted into silence. The afternoon sun glinting on Lucy's hair, the fields stretching out behind her, and the smell of gunpowder still on the wind. Harriet looked at her sister and knew for sure. Lucy no longer needed protection. She had chosen, loved, and stood firm against danger on her own 2 feet. That night, instead of a wedding feast, everyone gathered in the main house, drinking to a triumph, not just of love but of resilience. Lucy sat next to Caldwell, her small hand resting on his in a silent oath. Harriet stood across from her, a glass of wine in her hand, her heart filled with relief and sadness. She knew she had done the right thing, and even though she wasn't the one who stayed by that man's side, she kept something more precious: choice and freedom for both her sister and herself. Harriet stood on the porch of the wooden house, the morning wind blowing gently through her hair, carrying the scent of hay and the distant lowing of cows from the pasture. At the foot of the hill, the carriage was waiting to take her back to Cheyenne. From there, the train would take her back east, back to Philadelphia, back to the home she had once lacked but also loved. But her heart was no longer there. Part of it was here, in the wilderness she had feared, with people she had never expected to be so attached to. Caldwell stood beside Lucy, his hand gently squeezing her shoulder. Neither of them said anything, just looked at Harriet with a wordless but grateful gaze. O'Connell, Bartholomew, and the other servants had come to see her off. They did not say tearful farewells, just nodded, smiled, and looked after her as if to send her off to a part of their lives they would never forget. Harriet turned and hugged Lucy tightly. "You did better than anyone I know," she whispered. "I'm proud of you." Lucy hugged her, not crying, but her voice trembling slightly. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had the courage to walk this path. Thank you for giving me that chance." Harriet smiled. "You didn't give up. You just opened a door. I walked through it." She left not because she had lost, but because she knew it was time to make a proper retreat. Lucy had love, a home where fields stretched to the horizon, and Harriet, she had what she had lost in all those years of sacrifice for her family, herself. The train left Cheyenne in the afternoon. She sat by the window, watching the mountains roll by like living pictures. Harriet didn't cry, nor did she doubt. She felt a sense of peace she had never felt before, as if everything were going right, even if not according to the original plan. Back in Philadelphia, Harriet found things different. The old house had been restored with the money Caldwell had sent, a thank you, a pledge that the Edgewater family would never be forgotten. Her father was better, her mother less anxious, and even Emma Billings, her best friend, now believed that love could come in the strangest of ways. Harriet had chosen a simple but meaningful job. She became a teacher at a small girls' school where every day she saw young girls with big dreams. And when she wrote back to Circle B Ranch, she wrote not with nostalgia, but with gratitude. Dear Lucy, sometimes I think of that first morning you came to the farm, your eyes shining like stars and your hands shaking with anxiety. And now there you are, steady, brave, the wife of a man I could not love, but whom you loved for me. You have a family, and I have a new life. We both won, just in different ways. I have not forgotten those mornings in the West, the sunlight slanting through the wooden doors, the sound of horses in the yard, and the smell of your first baked bread for Caldwell. I keep it all in my heart, a beautiful chapter of my life, though short. If someday you have a daughter, tell her the story of how you and I changed roles in an unexpected play. Tell her that life does not always lead us where we choose, but always leads us where we need to go. Love you more than ever, Harriet. She folded the letter, sealed it, and walked out. The sunset stretched across the street. The church bells rang in the distance, and in Harriet's heart there was nothing left to regret. Because she had lived, loved, and made the person she loved happy. She did not need to end up in a marriage, because what she needed more than anything was the chance to start over in her own way. And so, with the wind at her back and hope ahead, Harriet Edgewater truly began a new life.